Okay, it's that time of year again when I advertise The Chosen Penguin by Warren O'Hara. And last year, a number of you bought the book around Christmas time. Some of you bought several copies because you wanted to give the book as a present to your family and friends. And some of you even left reviews on Amazon, and that is much appreciated as well. This year, I have knocked down the price of the paperback. I can't remember what it was last year, but it's down by about €4 or €5 in price. I'm going to read chapter 42, which is called Female Liberation of Eggcelence. So I'll just give you some background. The colony of penguins, emperor penguins, had already risen to great heights, and then it began to rot from the inside out. Now, the arrival of king penguins, a small number of king penguins, helped to exacerbate that decline, that societal decline. And we're now at the stage whereby the king penguins have taken over the emperor penguins' colony. They control all the levers of power, the food supply, medicine, and, of course, education. And chapter 42 relates to the latter. So here we go. Chapter 42, Female Liberation of Eggcelence. The daughters of the old king, with permission from the council, began conducting classes, mandatory classes for all young female penguins who were coming of age. In these classes, that no male could attend or even eavesdrop on, the females were told time and time again that eggs were a sign of slavery and oppression. Their slavery and their oppression, that was. The egg, the old king's daughters explained, was rejected by the body because it was not part of the body and was a waste product thereof. No egg was nice, but the least terrible egg, they were told, was that which was unfertilized. An unfertilized egg meant liberty thereafter for the female. She could continue working her way up in her job and/or just kicking back and enjoying life. Because the essence of life, the old king's daughters explained, was to enjoy it at all costs, to get caught up in the moment and the feeling of the moment, to not let the moment pass you by. Carpe diem, seize the day because tomorrow did not exist. And what did not exist could never be guaranteed. And what could not be guaranteed was not worth knowing at all. The fertilized egg, however, meant a continued slavery for those females. For, that egg having hatched, they would have to feed around the clock a creature that did not resemble any penguin, a creature that depended on them for all its needs and thereby was enslaving them. To these statements on fertilized eggs by the old king's daughters, one female in the class, a very conservative greenie, raised a flipper and asked if she could bring up something that might be worth considering. The old king's daughters, unsure of how to respond to this unorthodoxy, a student speaking instead of listening, nodded their heads. And the student rather shyly stood up and started to explain to both teachers and classmates how emperor penguins shared the duties of chick rearing almost equally, especially if the male was not working long shifts as a netter or laborer, and how, back in the day, prehistory, pre-igloo, pre-fire, it was known that it was the males who had incubated the eggs, while the females had been free to go on long sea journeys and to bring back the food. The old king's daughters nodded their heads again and said that this story was very interesting and thanked the female for sharing it with them and with the students. But that female was not welcomed back to class the next day. The old king's daughters explained how the hatchery had been a place of oppression up until now, oppression for all females. Indeed, it was thither that females were led by their partners, the females themselves not having gone of their own free will to lay an egg. And the egg was almost always the worst type of egg, a fertilized one. And the creature that would hatch from the egg was a horrible sight to behold. How could anyone in their right mind call that creature a penguin? No, it was not a penguin. It was the wicked symbol of their oppression. That creature that had hatched from the egg was what would keep them from enjoying life and living it up. And so, that creature had to be squashed. It had to be liquidated. And if the egg that bore it could be liquidated as soon as it was laid, then all the better. For then one would not need to witness the oppressive creature itself that smashed its way from that egg and needed feeding, constant feeding of them. Yes, that creature, and it had to be stated again, was not a little penguin at all, but rather was a symbol of their female slavery. Most of the female students nodded their heads in agreement when hearing this. And since the old king's daughters were the richest females in the colony, that meant they were the most successful too. And being successful meant higher social status. And so, if the old king's daughters, the chosen penguin's daughters, Dr. Penguinity's daughters, were telling them that eggs were evil, then evil they had surely to be. And the fact that the female students existing here and now was due to their mothers laying fertilized eggs and rearing those hatchlings to adulthood didn't even seem to come into the equation for them at all. And even though it was known that the old king's daughters all had chicks of their own, that they too had laid fertilized eggs and were now mothers to those chicks, the female students were either unable to grasp or even notice this glaring inconsistency, this outright hypocrisy. And the mantra became simplified, and all females were made to repeat it in unison and to sway side to side as they were doing so. Eggs are bad, fertilized eggs are worse, and all hatchlings are oppression itself. Now, how would murder, embryonicide, or just downright slaughter of fertilized eggs be categorized in the emperor colony? The word chosen would have to be a clever one which would ghost under the radar of contemporary morality. Ejection was considered at first. Reproductive health was considered too. Shell shock treatment had been on the table for a while. Liquidation had been used frequently at the start as well. But in the end, the old king and a few members of the council settled on that which they considered to be the nicest, cleanest sounding, and softest sounding word. They settled for the word goo-goo. Yes, it sounded innocuous. The etymology was based on what a freshly laid egg contained if opened up, and that was goo. Runny, sloppy, sludgy, messy, harmless old goo. The term quickly fell into common parlance, and from there became defined equally as an adjective, gooey gooey, and a verb, to goo goo, and a phrasal verb, to goo goo in, and an adverb, gooily gooily. And so, a female who had just come of age and did not want to spend her time rearing a chick would, obviously if she had copulated with a male before Flipper, go for a goo-goo. Likewise, she could tell other females whom she met on her way to the hatchery that she was about to goo-goo in an egg, namely to lay it and let the staff there destroy it at their leisure. In fact, a female who was going to goo-goo in her egg was praised and embraced to no end by the other young females. Henceforth was it agreed. Females would have the right to choose whether to have their eggs fertilized or not. The only thing that was not an option in the process was to lay those eggs anywhere else but in the hatchery itself. And if a female were discovered laying an egg outside of the hatchery, she would have to pay a penalty for that crime, because from now on it would be a crime. To wit, going forward, whether fertilized or unfertilized, all eggs laid in the colony would go through the flippers of the old king, and if not through his, then through those of his daughters.